Welcome back to the show. I'm with Nighar Singh, Punjabi style martial arts, which goes back over 10,000 years. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now tell me the style, tell me how it came about, and tell me how you got involved in it.
This art is a very ancient art. It's come from northern part of India, the Punjab. It is, as we say, prehistoric, and talks about ancestors fighting animals in jungles, surviving against the animals. So hence, the emphasis is all on evasiveness, all on misaligning.
Tell me about how you got involved in this martial art.
Well, in 1984, I went over to India just to meet my grandparents, and then by chance, just by pure chance, in a local festival, I met my master.
Wow.
And from there on, it started. And I was so impressed by the old man. The first day I met him, he was at the festival. He was talking to some young men, talking about martial arts, fighting. My Punjabi at that time was not great, so I listened in, heard a few words which I recognized, and then he looked over to me, and he looked at my physique. Fortunately for him, from a young age, my granddad was a wrestling champion, so as a child I lived in the Punjab with my grandparents.
Okay.
And he introduced me into these traditional wrestling regime, exercise, so on. So even when I came back to England, I kept the regime up. So physically I was in the right shape, I should say, for the art, and he saw that.
Okay.
And he just came over to me and said, would you like to learn how to fight as your ancestors fought? And I was
Wow,
not in
big
a
challenge, eh?
yeah, well, I was not in a sort of habit of saying no to the elders, like I've been brought up that way, and I said, okay, I will do that. So next day I came up, and when I arrived, he had a stick ready for me. He said, here's a stick, attack me with it. I'm 80 years old. He made a point of saying, I'm 80 years old, attack me with it, and don't be shy, and so on. So he goaded me on, and I attacked him, and before I realised I was all the floor and so on. In time, I really appreciate the science behind it. But at that time, I had no understanding. I was basically awestruck by the old man throwing me. I'll be 17 at the time.
This style of martial art is a military art for the military, but there's a martial part which you train general students in the community.
Yeah, the art itself is a battlefield art. It's an ancient battlefield art. So, whereas in Europe, when you have any particular system come up, when a new system came up, they abandoned the old. Okay. In India, it's a bit unique. In India, you get very modern stuff, and then you got rituals and things going on for thousands of years at the same time as well. Like.
Wow.
So with this art, everything that's been kept from thousands of years ago, from our ancestors when they lived in the jungles, etc., and so on, fighting the animals, and then as the history has progressed, all that different weapons and idea, tactics and strategies, etc., they just keep on adding new things on. They never get rid of the old stuff. So the art itself is a battlefield art, but it can be taught also in forms of, like in the classical form, it can be taught in self-defense. It can always taught in terms of like British self-defense, personal self-defense. But then the classical form obviously is the ancient battlefields, but being a tactical art, is also applied to modern day military stuff as well, because in this art nothing is thrown away, so you keep what is good in the past and you learn from what is good in the present and so on. So the art is always developing, evolving. So by the time muskets and guns came in the 16th, 17th century, that was incorporated, and those muskets and so on now were transformed to modern day firearms, etc. So on. But at the end it's all the same, so they just bring it all in.
I noticed that you move, because you're working with more than one opponent, like Aikido movements, using the evasion, using not being there, using the direction of the opponent. Tell me how that's integrated, really. Is it a science into that part?
Yeah, there's a whole science of how we approach a fight and so on. So we always appreciate, we don't step in this art, we spill. So we spill our center of gravity as we step into it. Then by doing that, in a single step, we can then change the direction several times. So we have that characteristic Indian-esque movements or dance types of classical stuff. And then we appreciate understanding range. So we get to the very peripheral of the range, and we take what we call a perfect pause, where we take a snapshot of the opponent. And then next thing is we just subtly misalign. Most martial arts in the world work at 45 degrees. We work at 22.5 degrees.
22 and a half, not 23?
Nah, 22 and a half, 22 and a half, that's it. Very precise, 22 and a half degrees, and then we misalign, and we cut in, and then we destroy it. In this art, the emphasis is not on parrying or blocking. The emphasis upon is just taking a misaligning, taking a superior tactical positioning, just like an army would. The army would approach a battlefield, survey the terrain, take up understand range just to get their firearms fired.
Well, I saw understanding the range was really important, because you're using different size weapons at the same time, so you've got to master the weapon of the short range and then the long range. And
we mix it all in. I mean, a lot of our weapons can be employed in various combinations. So the hilts are designed so we embrace the hilts. The hilts are designed that they can accommodate a secondary weapon in the same hand, etc. and so on. And thus we combine short, long range, and this high idea of versatility of weapons is what makes us different. Rather than taking a single tool to a job, we take a whole toolbox. So when we see an opponent, we will just take different weapons and so on and adapt to it. And so this art is, like, traditionally, we won't call, this is not a fighting art.
Yeah.
This is traditionally spoken of as a killing art.
Yes.
There's no engagement of blows, nothing like that, just constant advancing.
The live blades.
Yeah,
and
we train with live blades.
Yeah.
The beginners, we introduce everything through unarmed combat and so on. With the children, we always teach inoffensive techniques, just the personal self-defense technique, nothing offensive, because most children are going to fight other children, so we don't want to harm any children. But later on, sticks are introduced, and then as we progress, we ultimately aim to fight with the live blades. At no point we will fight with any kind of armament on, because the whole aim of the art is to overcome armor and to go around armor and so on. Whereas armor is traditionally used on the battlefield, and we will wear that when we demonstrate and so on. But the art is to overcome armor. So it's one of the few arts in the world that actually employs for training live blades. And these are antique blades, these are battlefield blades, which have been handed down from families.
Now, you open up to children. Did it open up to different cultures as well and different communities?
The art itself in India now is but extinct. Like, I'm the last one in the world teaching this art, and that's it. And what we realize is this art, rather than keeping it secret and behind doors and so on, which traditionally was like all martial cultures, but nowadays, this art is, as we open it up, and then like recently we went over to Americas in Cold Steel, and as we open up to the martial art last 4 years in this country, the martial arts themselves are now realizing the depth and the richness of this art and so on. Like I said,
all those years of...
All those years. So, I mean, there's a lot of tradition. In northern India, there's a tradition that all of this art is 1,000 years old. It was between 6th century BC and 5th century AD at a place called Taxila, which if you look up Encyclopedia Britannica and so on, you'll come up with an ancient university from Hindus to Buddhists there, and that's the place where this art got amalgamated. So there's 10 styles within the art which are combined together to form one single formless style. Yeah. And in that Taxila is interesting. There's Indians there, there are Greek masters coming there, Persian masters coming up, Kushan Empire, Chinese coming up. So it's a real cosmopolitan place that is a place of learning, one of the first in the world, where they're inviting people with knowledge to come and teach.
Fantastic.
So for people from all over the world are coming there. And so if you look at the weapons that we have, and people recognize in the weapons many different cultural contributions. So in my people, like 6,000 years ago, were probably blonde and blue-eyed like yourself from Central Russia. Like. So 6,000 years moved to India. So the art is, in that sense, like original sort of mixed different cultures coming. And the Punjab where we live is a doorway to India. Okay. So every foreign invader has come through there. And everyone has left the imprint. And all those weapons and so on got assimilated. Yeah. And rather than throwing away like in India, we just keep everything adding on. So the art is very ancient. At the same time, the art is many cultures and so on, and the whole aim of the art is to do what's called, it's practical, it's quick. The aim is chatka, we call chatka, means quick kill, direct, quick kill. Advance upon the enemy, hit the peripheral, take a snapshot of his body positioning, misalign, cut in, put him on his back heels, and just cut down.
So, apart from the preparation exercises and conditioning, is there a curriculum that the students would follow and progressively? Is there any sort of achievement rankings that traditional martial arts have? Yeah,
there's no belt system as such, like, so there's no curriculum in that sense of the word, but there's a solid structure of how it's taught, like. So you'll be taught first that's called the underlying principle. So you're taught the footwork, the basic footwork, and then what we have is the inner footwork as well within the basic footwork, and then within the inner footwork we have deceptive footwork. So you have 3 layers of footwork going in. Then you have understanding of range, outer range, inner range, and then misalignments. And then after you do that, then what we have is we have 10 fighting styles, which are based, the first 7 are based on classical animals, mythological creatures from Indian tradition. Okay. Then 3 are based on ancient Indian gods and goddesses, male, female. Then finally what we do is we construct the art layer upon layer to a very to the heights of what's called form expression. And then we'll give analogies like climbing a mountain. So you climb up the mountain, then you're going to come down. And when we come down, then we take like 10 stages to construct it, and then there's over 21 stages like that, so on, to deconstruct it. Okay. So we then eventually get to a style which we call granddad. Okay. It's old man, like so on, and which is a completely formless style which is integrated in everyday movement, so it gives nothing away. Okay. And that's how the art works. So each stage is then taught systematically to students, but the way the art works is, because it's so vast. In the ancient days, we were training, I mean, when I trained, it was 10 hours a day. In the old school, they'd be training like 17 hours a day. Wow. So the art is so, because we're talking about 10 unarmed styles, we're talking about from ground fighting,
Yes.
to stand-up grappling, to fighting in water, fighting on ladders, fighting on horseback, fighting with spears, swords, guns. So it's all systems. So it's a very large system. So when we teach, it's cyclic. And depending on when the student joins, depends where we are in the cycle. Like.
Yeah.
So you may come in at a very high stage,
Yes.
but then the cycles will go around. And each time you go around the cycles, and the analogy they give is like, in the old days in India, they used to have what you call, I can say, like grinding stones.
Yes.
And you put grain in there and you grind it.
Yeah.
But the first time around, it just breaks it up. Then you put it back in there and break it. Eventually, after many grindings, you get that fine flour. And that's what we're doing here. We're grinding it through the mill.
Yes.
And each time it gets refined, subtler. And then, depending on your ability, some people just leave at self-defense. Others will make it to about skirmishing level. Others a bit more dueling level, and so on. And there's no stress. So according to your aptitude, you sort of stop up the mountain. Like only very few climb right to the top and then come back down.
In its formulation, I guess you talked about the animals. Do you think that the weapons were designed, obviously with lions, tigers, things are much more powerful than
earlier
humans?
weapons like the tridents and so on are specifically designed to counter elephants and tigers and so on in those times and so on. And later weapons, they'll adapt to whoever they're facing and so on. And then when different cultures came in, they brought different weapons in. Again, they adapted to them. The key thing in our weapons is, I mean, they're very advanced, like even the hilts of these. If you look at the hilts here, many Europeans, when they look at Indian weapons, they don't appreciate the science behind it. A lot of them try to put their hand in by just grabbing it like this.
Yes.
It's not like we Indians got small hands. The culture I belong to, we are not small people. Like we're very generally 6 foot plus.
Yes.
And so the science in this is, you can tell how much science, that we don't grab it, we actually brace it. So there's a brace going on here, there's a brace going on, there's a brace here. And the aim of the sword is that in between each strike, we can dance the weapon, so we can quickly slip by any kind of shields, any kind of what you call other weapons, and just finally pick through the armor and chamber. So there's a lot of science gone into how the weapons are evolved. The weapons are very light, and the weapons are dance, and the weapons are keen, sharp, and so on. And the emphasis is not upon blocking or parrying like in the Western sense.
It's more slicing and dicing.
Yeah. When we slice and dice again, we don't use the arms as much. Our arm movement is very small. It's the body, like. We sink our body mass through our grabs, holds, and strikes and drive through with our kinetic energy. So at no point our fluidity, our footwork is compromised. And we always engage, and you notice one thing in engage our system, we always have 1 foot off the ground.
Okay. 1 foot off the ground.
Because they ask a question, they say to yourself, do you spend most of your life on both feet, off both feet, or on 1 foot? Off feet, obviously when you're sleeping, both feet when you're standing or sitting, on 1 foot when you're walking. In ancient cultures are very active cultures, so they spent most of their life off 1 foot. So staying off 1 foot, in other words, walking movement is natural to us. And many martial arts, we feel, have lost that natural. They get a lot of the stances are rigid, a lot of the stances are there's too much emphasis on stance rather than positioning and movement. And so style varies that way. And especially in the ancient days when they're engaging tigers, lions in the jungle and so on, you can't parry or block a tiger. You got to get out of the way, like.
Yes, indeed. Or same as a wild boar.
Yeah.
Now, the mindset in the military side, in the combat, the battlefield, multiple attackers. How do you keep? Is there something in the training that you apply today that would have been useful in the battlefield of keeping calm and enhancing the awareness around you?
Yeah. There's a lot of technical aspects. So, for instance, when we engage with opponents, rather than using the center of the eye, we employ the peripheral. The peripheral is 3 times quicker at picking up shadow, light, and movement. And this comes from the fact that many times in ancient India, older men used to develop cataracts. So the cataracts affects the middle of the eye, but not the peripheral. And from there, so your peripheral vision is naturally inclined to pick up movement. So that's why a lot of people, when they think to the side, they flinch and so on. And so that understanding is understood about the peripheral visions and so on.
So they
use that. They also appreciate that rather than chasing after limbs and especially weapons, what they do is they keep the eye on the center here, the core, hard hit. Because whenever you throw a punch or kick or move a weapon in a particular way, you have a corresponding move here. And if you get competent with that, how they move, you can understand how they move, but how much power they're moving and so on. So if we had about 4 people we're engaging, rather than try to keep an eye on all the weapons or limbs, that'd be like having a conversation with 4 or 5 people. You won't understand. They keep the peripheral vision, scanning on these, So they understand which movement is this. And then they also control distance and space.
Yes.
So obviously someone who's near, they can gauge you quicker, this and there. And then constantly, the whole skill is all about misaligning. The misalignments are very fine. Like I said, 22.5 degrees. We're only seeking to, what we say is like at the beginning, you'll begin dancing on the battlefield.
Yes.
But at the end, as you get more and more accomplished, you'll be dancing on the point and the edge only, meaning you don't have to misalign. It's the very point and the edge of the blade, or the fist or the kick and so on. Nothing more, nothing excessive. So the idea is clean. You want to achieve complete efficiency. And that takes years of practice.
Sure. Well, it's been a fascinating journey listening to the history and the culture of your martial art. Thank you very much for being in our show. Unfortunately, time is running out. And I hope you've enjoyed the expo here as well.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Okay, right. It's off to a break and we're coming back with more action, so stay tuned.